Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to totally demystify how the economy actually works. People tend to think the economy is this massive, confusing, complicated machine, but really, it's just governed by a few invisible rules. And the thing is, most of us never learn these rules. Because of that, we end up getting fooled by bad policies or just terrible advice. But by the time we wrap up today, you're going to understand the true hidden mechanics of the world around you. We're going to make you absolutely impossible to fool. Let's get right into it. So think about this for a second. Why does making food cheaper actually make it disappear? I know, it sounds totally backward. It completely breaks our intuition, right? But that's what this explainer is all about. The massive, sometimes shocking gap between good intentions and actual reality. Once you see the hard proof of how human behavior actually operates, you literally can't unsee it. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to look at a super fascinating real-world example, straight from the source material, the 2008 Maryland millionaire tax experiment. The core theme we're unpacking here is how the economy always, absolutely always, prioritizes rewards over good intentions. So, here was the state of Maryland's problem back in 2008. They needed money, and their proposed solution was, well, pretty straightforward. Just tax the rich. The expectation, which, let's be honest, makes total logical sense on the surface, is that if you just raise taxes on your wealthiest citizens, you directly and simply raise revenue for the state. Makes perfect sense, right? The state actually did the math on this. At the time, Maryland had about 8,000 millionaires living there. They projected that by raising taxes on this specific group, the state would easily collect an additional $106 million every single year. Boom, done. Problem solved, right? Well, in year one, they collected the tax, and things actually went perfectly to plan. But in year two, a funny thing happened. When somebody counted the millionaires again, only 6,000 remained. 2,000 millionaires had simply vanished. They literally moved somewhere else. And crucially, they took their businesses, their restaurants, and all those jobs right along with them. And here is the truly jarring reality of the situation. Instead of gaining that expected $106 million, Maryland actually suffered a $257 million loss in total tax revenue. Let's just pause on that number for a second. Over $250 million down. It's a massive, incredibly expensive irony. So, what exactly went wrong here? What is the underlying economic law at play? It all comes down to this one clear rule. People respond to rewards, not intentions. See, Maryland intended to raise money, but what their policy actually did was inadvertently reward those millionaires for leaving the state. You can wish all day long that people would just sit there and accept higher taxes, but intentions do not matter to the economy. Rewards do. And you can apply this directly to your own daily life, your business, your relationships. Stop asking what you want people to do and start asking yourself, what behavior am I actually rewarding? Which brings us to our next major invisible rule. Every single choice has a cost. Think about something super relatable, like having a crisp $10 bill in your pocket. You've got the choice between, say, a fancy coffee, a burger, or a movie ticket. Can you have all three? No way. $10 is $10. Getting the coffee inherently means giving up the burger. Every single choice you make means giving up something else. Now, what's really mind-blowing is how this concept scales up to completely change your life. Look at the side-by-side. On one side, a $50,000 luxury car. On the other, a $20,000 reliable commuter car, plus the resulting $250,000 in investment growth from the $30,000 you saved and invested over time. That luxury car, it doesn't just cost you $50,000. It actually costs you what that money could have become over decades. That, my friends, is your opportunity cost. We can even see this play out on a massive macroeconomic scale. The source material contrasts Venezuela, a nation with just staggering amounts of oil wealth that is, unfortunately, broke, against Switzerland, a country with virtually nothing valuable in the ground that somehow sits as one of the richest nations on Earth. It just proves that economics isn't really about what you have, it's entirely about what you do with what you have. So, the crucial takeaway here is fully grasping this simple definition. A trade-off is spending what your money, time, or energy could have become. Remember, every dollar you spend, every single hour you work, can only be used once. So I strongly urge you to look at your daily life and constantly ask yourself, what exactly am I giving up to get this? This perfectly sets up the truth about prices. There is this absolutely fascinating story from the sources about the former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev visiting London. He was just walking around, absolutely marveling at the city, genuinely trying to understand how millions of people manage to get fed 3 meals a day without some giant central planner or, a government minister of sandwiches coordinating exactly where the bread goes. He literally asked Margaret Thatcher how she makes sure people get food. And I just love her quote here. "I don't. Prices do." It's brilliant. Prices act as these invisible messengers. They organically solve the totally impossible math of global supply and demand every single day. They bring coffee from Brazil and fish from Norway right to your local corner store without any human or computer formally sitting there in charge of the whole shebang. But what happens when human intentions decide to meddle with these natural messengers? Well, that is exactly why price controls fail. Let's use a highly relatable school pizza analogy to break down exactly how this disaster happens in real time. Let's just walk through this completely predictable cascade of failure. Step 1, the school announces free unlimited pizza at lunch. Hooray, right? Step 2, literally everyone shows up, even the kids who normally bring their own lunch from home. Step 3, the early kids hoard extra slices, just in case they get hungry later. And step 4, the pizza is totally wiped out in 20 minutes and the late kids starve. Artificially lowering prices always creates this predictable, totally disastrous chain reaction. The source illustrates this pattern with some really powerful real-world examples. In New York, rent control literally led to landlords abandoning maintenance because the buildings became essentially worthless to operate. The result? Thousands of empty, rotting apartments sitting right next to a massive homelessness crisis. In Zimbabwe, keeping food prices artificially low caused farmers to simply stop selling, which emptied store shelves within hours. And conversely, over in India, setting wheat prices artificially high created a massive surplus of 11 million tons of rotting wheat, while people in other places starved. The pattern is crystal clear here. Setting prices too low creates horrible shortages, while setting them too high creates incredibly wasteful surpluses. So, taking all that into account, we can define a price control as an artificial limit on prices that historically disrupts supply. The source gives a pretty stern warning here about a really cruel irony. While price controls are almost always intended to help the poor, it's often the poorest who end up suffering the absolute most when the supply totally disappears. Think about it. Rich people can always find workarounds or pay a bribe, but the most vulnerable, they're left with absolutely nothing. Okay, let's bring this macroeconomic stuff right back down to personal empowerment. Your wage is a price too. To really get this, let's first look at profits and losses. Basically, they're just honest directions, like if you bring fruit snacks to the school lunch table and trade them for a profit. The market is screaming at you, yes, keep going, people want this. If you bring raisins and nobody wants them, so you take a loss, the market is saying, no, please stop doing this. Losses are honestly just as valuable as profits, simply because they tell you to stop wasting your energy. And this brilliantly illustrates how this whole concept applies to your own income. Imagine for a second you run a lemonade stand. Maria helps you out and sells 10 extra cups, creating $10 of actual value. Jake, on the other hand, is a bit slow, spills drinks, and only sells 2 extra cups, creating just $2 of value. A wage is simply a price based on the value created. You can pay Maria up to $10 and break even, but paying Jake $10 means you're literally losing money every single hour he stands there. It's not about a boss being generous or mean, it is just pure, undeniable math. The super clear takeaway here is that you are paid for results, not time. The source points out that forcing wages above the actual value a worker creates doesn't just magically create wealth out of thin air. Instead, it leads business owners to do things like buy automated self-checkout machines, cut worker hours, or even close their shops entirely. So if you want to earn more money, the most effective path for sure is to just increase your own skills and create more value. So how do we actually exchange that value? Well, there's this really common illusion out there that trade is some kind of war with winners and losers. But it's really not. Think about the absolute simplest everyday example. You trade half of your sandwich for half of your friend's pizza. Did the total amount of food in the room change? No. But are you both happier? Yes. You didn't beat your friend, and she didn't beat you. Trade literally makes everyone richer. This everyday logic builds right into the economic theory of comparative advantage. Let's look at this setup. We have a lawyer who charges $300 an hour and a cleaner charging $20 an hour. Now, even if the lawyer is incredibly good at cleaning, like way better than the cleaner, it still makes total mathematical sense to hire the cleaner. Why? Because trading your weakness allows you to intensely focus on your strength. The lawyer pays $20, works an extra hour making $300 doing legal work, and comes out way, way ahead. Whole countries operate on this exact same principle of cooperation. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly vital question for you. Are you spending hours on your weaknesses, stealing from your strength? Seriously, think about your own personal time trade-offs this past week. Every single hour spent doing something you are bad at is an hour stolen from what you are genuinely great at. You don't win by fixing what's broken. You win by doubling down on what works. Thank you so much for trading a few minutes of your time for this explainer. Understanding these invisible rules of economics won't magically make you rich overnight, but it absolutely unequivocally makes you impossible to fool.